You're listening to the Rusted Robot Podcast, the #1 rated robot-related podcast in northeastern Ontario.
Hello, and welcome to episode 184 of the Rusted Robot Podcast for Sunday, January the 21st, 2018. I'm your host, Sean.
I'm Josh.
My name is Optimus Prime.
Hello, I am C-3PO Human-Cyborg Relations.
I am Locutus, a Borg.
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
I'm an android.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
Counterfeit, facsimile, replica.
We need some sort of robot. Ah, crap! I'm some sort of robot.
By your command.
How are you, Josh?
I'm tired.
You look tired.
I've not slept well for the last 2 nights. It's terrible.
That is terrible. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But I have some exciting news.
Yeah?
Do you know a man named Larry Nemecek?
Yes, the author.
Yes, that's true. He is an author. He was in Star Trek Continues, the web series, and he's done a bunch of other things. And he's got a new podcast coming out on the 23rd, just a couple days from now.
Okay, cool.
And we have an interview with him. I sat down with him the other night, and he talked all about Star Trek Discovery and his new podcast and a few other things. So we're going to play that momentarily.
Okay.
Did you know? I don't know if you've listened to the last episode that we recorded last week.
I'm in the midst of listening to it. It's the last podcast I listened to in the week.
Ah, okay.
Because I was on it.
Yeah, of course. I get that.
So I listened to it for, remembering what we said just before the next podcast.
Makes sense. Yep, I do the same. So, after we recorded and I was editing the thing, came across some news. Turns out that there's a rumor going around that Viacom, the parent company of Paramount, and CBS are going to re-merge. Do you know what that means?
Well, that would mean that Star Trek would be back together as a movie and TV series.
It would all be integrated again.
Which is meaningless.
Why is that meaningless?
Because they're not going to integrate the two that they have. The two that they have are incompatible.
They are incompatible, because one's the Kelvin timeline and one's the Prime.
So it's not like we're going to have to worry about them interacting.
True.
Okay. So it will have no impact on the TV series or the movies. They are unrelated. Unless they scrap one and play off the other.
You think they would do that?
They might scrap the movies.
I could see that.
Because they're not, they're good.
Yeah.
Well, no, they're not.
You don't like them.
Some people like them.
Right.
But they don't have a critical following. And at this point, nobody's clamoring for the next movie. Which means you can do a soft reboot with Star Trek Continues, the motion picture, and have it be a boring 2-hour movie where they're looking at a space probe.
Right.
You can do that.
You can do all kinds of things.
Yeah. Or giant space probe mushroom. Whatever.
Ooh, there you go. The mushroom drive probe from the alternate dimensions.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So it's not really going to have an impact if they do. It just means another mega corporation is going to come together and slowly influence our entire lives.
There you go. Exactly. And speaking of that news, there's news from Sony, and an article I came across says, Sony Pictures chairman says the studio could be up for sale if it fails to grow. It says here, it looks like Sony just might be headed down the same path as 21st Century Fox. Sony Pictures Entertainment recently attended the NAPTA conference, and according to Variety, the studio's chairman, Tony Vinciquerra, recently admitted that Sony's entertainment operation has reached a point where it's either they grow or they sell. During the conference, Vinciquerra said that he expects to see major studios' ranks shrink from 6 to just 3 or 4 in the next few years, pointing at the upcoming finalization of Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox's assets. If we don't grow, we will be somebody's purchase. I didn't take the job to do it for a year and sell the company, Sony's chief told the conference moderator. Vinciquerra became Sony's new chairman last year, and he's trying his best to keep up with competition so that Sony stays in business. Coming in, there was pressure to create a sense of urgency and making sure people are aware the business is changing today, he said. If we're not on our toes, we're not going to be in business very long. So that's what's happening there.
Yeah, Sony's got Spider-Man.
Yeah.
What else do they got?
Well, actually, that's what it says in the article. The studio has been trying its best to keep the competitive edge. Fans are looking forward to Tom Hardy's Venom this October, and they hope that it successfully launches a new franchise. And that's pretty much where the article ends. It's coming out October 5th, so we'll see what happens.
So they got the Spider-Man and related people.
Exactly.
But what do they have? That's one little nugget.
Yes.
And even that, to make it worth their while, they have had to partner with Disney already.
Yeah. Essentially.
So what else do they have that can compete in the market?
Well, I can't think of anything. Can you?
That's the problem.
Right.
Sony does a lot of decent one-shot movies, but they haven't hit a good franchise that'll keep them running, that they can use to power all these one-shots.
Right.
Because the one-shot is a hit or miss. You got no backing, no hype to it. You just whatever thing you can generate from it previous. Right? It's word of mouth and advertising, and that's it. That's all you can get to it.
Yeah.
You don't have, oh crap, we saw the last one. The last one was great. And I can't think of any series that is that for Sony.
Not really. No, I guess they should stick to their PlayStations.
Here's the thing, though. PlayStation has a lot of exclusive content that they could be dipping into. But video game movies never really work. So that's always, yeah. But they got a lot of talented people on that side of the business who do story stuff. Tap them, pull them over.
Well, yeah. Makes sense.
Either that, or, like, you got the algorithms. You know what's happening. You know what people like. Because story-wise, you know what people like. Because you've got a giant spread. Yep. You want to build a franchise that'll draw people in. You can't make it a romantic comedy.
No, not so much.
You can't make it a drama. It's got to be an action-adventure.
That's right. That's what sells.
That's the grind that'll get you your money.
Yes. Puts the butts in the seats.
Exactly. So, what do you got that can be action-adventure? Nobody's really doing... Well, you got one space thing out there. You got lots of superhero things out there. You got one space thing. How about doing a space thing? Problem is, I don't think they have the desire to actually do it.
It's hard to say. It sounds like he wants to really grow the business, but maybe nobody else is helping him. I don't know. It's hard to say.
To me, that sounds like he's trying to get it sold.
Yeah, could be that too.
That's him saying, hey, look, make us an offer here. Rarely do you come out and say, hey, we're up for sale, come look at us.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them to think you're desperate.
Right, but clearly they seem to be.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens over the next little while. With all that being said, we're now going to get into the interview with Larry Nemecek. He has been on the podcast 2 other times before this. He was our first big guest on episode 8, and then we had him again on episode 49. This is the first Sean and Josh era podcast that he's been on. So,
cool.
Yes, it was a very great conversation, so we're going to play it here, and then we'll come back.
Accessing library computer data.
All right, Rusted Robot listeners, I have a special treat for you guys now. Making his 3rd appearance on the podcast, we have Dr. Trek himself, Larry Nemecek. Hi, Larry.
Woo, hey, lucky 3. Okay, we have a ways to get till 47, but we'll work on it.
Hey, we're getting there. We're getting there. So, how are you?
I'm doing well. Things are in my life they tend to be too crazy busy, but usually with a good outcome. So
oh, good. That's good.
A lot of good things, and we have Trek back on TV finally. The fallow years are over finally. So
finally, we waited forever. What do you actually think of Discovery?
I'm good. Well, I'm back and forth, but overall I love it, and I know that some of the people who are making it are old. I say old Trek fans, and I mean that with all the love. But it's been an interesting show. We can get into this, but I think a lot of people don't realize exactly how it's almost been three shows in one. It's almost had 3 evolutions. We laugh about how Star Trek series take 3 years before they settle down and get good.
Yep.
And I would suggest to people that measure, what is that in the Discovery years? It's only 15 episodes, but it's almost been like if you stretch that out to 7 years at 26 eps a year, it's almost like it's about on schedule.
I think you're right about that. Now the thing is on the Rusted Robot, I love the show. I think it's fantastic. And my co-host Josh, he hates it, and he actually stopped watching after episode 5. So I try to get him to go back. Yeah, he anticipated it, he waited for it, and he couldn't stand it. And I think it's great because I think they're subverting all the expectations, just like The Last Jedi did.
Well, right. And here's the thing. So I have reservations about the visual canon mainly.
Yes.
And I'm fine with the Klingons. I'm all for some species diversity. I think they'll get around to that. I mean, there's the reality side of my brain, and then there's the hopeful fanboy side of my brain.
Yeah, I agree.
And the business sided, I know how Hollywood is. Here's the world. And I always hope for a compromise between the two at best. And if one leans the other way, that's great. But just being on the air is a business decision, right?
Yes.
But the other side of the practicality is the evolutionary hoops the show has already jumped through, and the fact that somewhere along the way the project didn't implode.
Yes.
You know, which shows, we can get into that, but it shows like the importance of Star Trek and the importance of how CBS was bound and determined to launch their all-access service, and how it just happened to be Star Trek was what made sense to launch it, just like it made sense to launch UPN with Voyager.
That's right.
But yeah, no, I love the show. I love the way it's evolving. I think that's I think when this is all said and done and we look back at it in hindsight, rather than the valleys between the peaks, like right now we're in the show to show to show moment, which is annoying. And I think 3/4 of our discussion, will go away, just like it would have with any other show, except this is the first show of the social media era. So the discussion in between shows seems 1,000 times bigger than it ever did for Next Generation or even Enterprise.
Yes.
Because it is.
Right, because we're right in the midst of it, so we can't see the bigger picture.
Well, and we have a million channels. We have Twitter and Facebook, and we have podcasts, and we have all of this, air noise, airtime, online time to talk about it, and it just feels like it's more than it was, in the Next Gen days or the rerun days when you would talk about it with 4 or 5 of your closest friends, right? Or you would get on a message board and maybe 10 or 20 other people were talking, and that seemed like a ton of people.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, but no, we're watching the whole world fly by talking about Discovery, which is awesome.
It is.
In the big picture. And there's a lot of little wrinkles to this. But no, basically, I'm loving it. I think it's bending. And I've talked to couple of the writers. It's bending our way, their way. It's just been kind of a raging it was like a runaway freight train, not a runaway freight train, but a freight train that was headed to one destination. They decided to tilt it toward another slightly different one, and what that means. So, but it's mainly the visuals. I'll say this, mainly, the touchscreen consoles, the Holo viewer, and some of those things that make you sound like a techie little nerd.
Yeah.
But it is canon. If you're going to say Prime, there are those things. The Klingon look, I'm fine. I say species diversity. We just had the Tellarites and Andorians this last weekend, and I guess the world was breathless about what I thought of the Tellarites. But and I was okay with it, because on one hand, this is supposed to be mirror universe and ragtag rebel-y,
for sure.
type of thing.
It is.
And no one since day one on Journey to Babel has done the hard-snouted Tellarites like I would prefer, except for what I did on the Phase 2 New Voyages vignette that I got to play a Tellarite in. But it's all good. It's all good. I'm just glad to see them there. I have this gut feeling that the more the Discovery is on, the more it will be the show that most people want to see.
I think so too. We just have to give it a chance. Let it breathe and grow. Yeah,
but my biggest, and I think this will come out. I think it's coming out between the lines now, but it's also what I've been told, and it's there in the record. I just, it's one thing to know facts. It's another thing to realize what they mean. Just like it's one thing to say this is going to be a streaming show, 15 episodes, standalone shows, but they're all in a 15-chapter arc, and it's streaming once a week. And it's one thing to hear all that, and it's been 12 years since the last Trek was on TV, and the world has changed. Storytelling and TV and big TV, peak TV, cinema event TV is a thing now. But it's another thing to experience all of that and see what it means, aside from the intellectual, I get it. And I think we're still in the middle of that. People are still absorbing what all of those different tenets mean. There's more here than just the Trek. There's a lot going on, and everybody who was brought up on just like all the original series people, there's a lot of the original series people never started watching Next Gen.
Exactly.
For one reason or another. And we're in that same kind of, but then eventually it all blends together and people see it as one big, box on the shelf. So instead of
Yeah, I think we're in the third age of Star Trek is where we are.
Ooh, that sounds like it needs a little brass plaque. Okay.
I think so, because we
had the third age of Star Trek. Yeah,
it's true, because we had the original series, and then we had Next Gen to Enterprise, and then it sat dormant for a dozen years, and here it is again, third time's a charm.
Right. Well, and it's funny because I got so used to saying modern TV Trek versus the original, and you can't say that now, and it seems like the term that's popped out. I mean, I've said it a few times and I heard other people say it, so I don't know who gets credit, if credit is even doable, but the Berman era is kind of funny to hear. 87 to 05.
That's right. That's my Trek. I like TOS, but I wasn't around for it. I was born 10 years after it started, so it's not really my Trek, although I love it all. So
what's not really your Trek?
Well, the TOS, because I wasn't alive for that.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of people haven't been alive for a lot of things.
No,
when you say it's not really yours, you mean you'll watch it, but it doesn't resonate, or you mean you just can't know it the way it is, the Trek that you experience firsthand.
Exactly.
Nothing else can ever. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was 11 years old in 1987 when the Next Generation premiered, and I was there when Deep Space Nine came on, and Voyager and Enterprise, and when you were waiting week to week to week, and there was crossovers and that kind of thing. And people who watch it now for the first time, they don't get that. The nuances is gone.
You were there for Best of Both Worlds summer.
Exactly. That's right.
Well, that's it. See, that is the thing. For a long time, the only gap was between people who saw the original series. Well, there was primetime NBC original series, and then there was the rerun baby era, which was different. That was different, and that's what I am. I always said I'm a rerun baby. So the 10, 15 years of just, even when the movies were running, you still, again, that was 2 hours every 2 years, and it's not like you gave up watching the original series just because the movies were coming out in 79 and 82 and 84 and which is what built up to the next generation. The demand finally grew to the next generation being a viable economic, audience demand thing.
Yes.
But for so long, the only gap was, were you an NBC primetime watcher, or were you a after school kid that watched it at 4 or 5 every day after school, or at 6 in the evening before and that was the two dynamics. And then when Next Gen started, and a lot of people dropped out of active fandom, or their life changed, and they were still a big Kirk, Spock, McCoy 60s fan, movies, but they didn't keep up with all those shows that are on.
No, that's right.
Which is amazing. But then in turn, those shows, starting with Next Gen, the original audience, it was 10 times bigger than it had ever been for the original series, which itself was huge and was the first Dead show to be resurrected as a movie, and then Dead show to come back is not just a crappy little tacked on, bonanza of the Next Generation, but actually a thought out, we spent bucks on this, concept for a show and a wider universe and a franchise, and creating all these terms before they were buzzwords the way they are now with, the Marvel DC, or the DC universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and all of these things that are concepts now, and Star Trek was just doing because people wanted that, and it made sense. And yes, there's 2 series and a movie on now, as icing on the cake. Again, it's all part of the stuff that Star Trek pioneered, and now it's like textbook case. But back then, Star Trek was doing it because nothing else had ever affected people that way.
That's right.
And moved people that way. And people weren't media savvy and media available the way they are, ongoingly. Nothing else could sell VHS tapes and then DVDs,
It's true.
like Star Trek,
Nope,
right?
You're right.
So what had there been? You had rock, you had movie stars, occasionally hyper stars, and rock bands. You had Elvis and the Beatles, and before that you had Bing Crosby and Rudy Valley and Rudolph Valentino in the 20s. I mean, the media age, you would have a spike with a superstar, but they were always individually focused, and not until Star Trek did you have and Shatner and Nimoy aside, maybe, did you have like a concept like this that's done this. So anyway, and now it wrote the book, and now it's no big deal. And we have Comic-Cons every other weekend, at every town of 500 or more people. But yeah, it's changed. So Discovery, the gulf going into Discovery has been a paradigm shift in a lot of ways, and people act like, and I love the Orville too.
Oh, for sure.
People act like the Orville is their refuge to get their Trek, and I'm like,
it's true.
That's fine. That's wonderful. That's fine. That's what it's for. Although I think Seth MacFarlane is aiming for a little bit more than that, and maybe Fox isn't happy with him trying to aim for a little more than that. But yeah, I just think a lot of the stuff is we have to marinate. But if older fandom and veteran fandom is the noisier, louder one because they know all the ropes and the channels, the JJ fans, it's been 10 years now almost, but the JJ fandom and the Discovery fans, the people who are coming in with those,
yep,
maybe quieter now unless they've grabbed the channel somewhere and got the mic or got the mouse and they're talking into it. But I think they'll eventually very quickly be heard if they're not being heard already. Maybe YouTube stars and podcasters and Twitter channels are giving them a voice right now. But I think the older fandom always overlooks the newer fans coming into their peril.
I think so.
I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think it's something I'm very intrigued with. I want to really listen, because this time it's not just it's not just the subject matter and the way the show Discovery's done, but it's realizing that we're in the streaming age, we're in the premium channel, the binge watch age, and people, if they're first time coming to Trek, even if they're watching an old series, they're experiencing it totally differently than the way everybody has up till now, just because of technology and media, and the idea that even streaming, that Discovery is coming out once a week, that's almost like a throwback notion that's kind of cute. So it's like in the middle of everything else being so accessible. I like it that the streaming kids are having to get Discovery once a week, and it didn't just, which I knew they wouldn't do that. It didn't just drop a whole which would have been a whole waste, right?
Like Netflix, yeah.
Like on online demand time, and all the buzzword, all that would have been lost if they hadn't done it a week at a time. But so anyway, it's a nice throwback to them getting it that way. Which, see, older fans don't even think about it.
No, exactly.
But yeah. Anyway.
But yeah,
there's so much cool stuff about right now. People who are like narrowly focused on. That's why I have my fanboy bits like, Hall of Viewers, But then the producers are saying, we hear you, things are going to happen, and when you factor in mirror universes and universe jumping, and maybe somewhere we've been Prime adjacent or we've been Mirror adjacent, and we're not really in the, there's all that stuff. So until they say that and move ahead with a second season, what's the point aside from
And I wouldn't be surprised if they're not in the Prime timeline to begin with, and they never were.
Yeah, what? Say that again.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were never in the Prime timeline to begin with.
They were never in the Prime, right? If they were like Prime adjacent or something.
Yeah, just slightly off.
Yeah, and they pop in and they have subdued palette velour like Pike and.
Yes.
Although David Allen Mack has already tried to retcon things and gap smooth a little bit there and say that only the Constitution class ships had those style uniforms.
Yeah, so. I haven't read the book, but I've read reviews on it, so I'd like to get my hands on that.
But I think when the time goes by, we'll look back at this first season of Discovery and realize time will show how it really went through the Brian Fuller startup, and then the transition between the Brian Fuller team and the eventual team under Aaron and Gretchen, and then when they were free. They were free and clear to maneuver.
Yes, that's
clear
right.
and free to maneuver, basically. Yeah,
yeah.
It was like space. It was docked, then in space dock, and then now it's out going through warp maneuvers. And so that's why I'm really excited to see after the break what they come back with for their second season. But,
yeah, that's going to really show what it's all about.
Yeah.
Other than Star Trek Discovery, I'm sure you have other things going on.
Yeah, well, did I hear you say something about a podcast?
Actually, that's true. I did. Now you know that the Rusted Robot's been going on for 4 years and change, and this is your third time on it. Last summer, what I did was I started a new podcast called the Soul Forge Podcast.
Oh, okay.
It's not a geeky thing. It's more personal stories and growth and progress. And I don't have a lot of listeners. What I should have done was actually gone on other podcasts and spread the word.
Well, you can still do that.
Oh, I can still do that. And I think spreading the word by interviews with other people is a good idea. Do you think that's something that you would like to do one day? Maybe start up your own podcast?
Well, how about this, Sean?
Tell me.
How about we start right now?
Okay. What do you got for us?
What I got for you is take a look at this. Fancy you should say that, because January 23rd, and people will be hearing, in the future, if you're listening to this as an archive, you'll know already. But no, Rod Roddenberry came to me
okay.
after years and years. I love coming on your show, on other shows, other podcasts. But years ago, when the podcast boom started, I thought to myself, should I jump in and host my own?
Yes, the answer is yes.
And the answer is yes. Well, there were so many by then. There were lots of good ones and many, many more, maybe not so good ones. But a lot, good or bad, a lot of people are analyzing shows. They're talking about current events, or they're doing both, or they're looking at whatever it is. I didn't just want to throw my podcast on the pile. I didn't just want to be more same old, same old. Well, I had a couple of ideas, but I knew they were going to be, a little more involved. So I had plenty of other things grabbing my time.
You're a busy guy. What do you have going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, my documentary, The Con of Wrath, that I've been trying to wrap up now after 6-7 years here. We've just been doing it a little bit at a time, which was the plan, but now we're landing that. and launching my Portal 47.
47. 47.
No!
Fan experience business, which, again, my thing is, I was lucky enough to, I was a fan. I got to write the Next Generation Companion, moved to LA, experienced so much of the Berman era and after from a front row seat. My wife worked on Voyager. I helped launch StarTrek.com, worked on the experience at Vegas, and have been lucky enough to be a convention guest and convey a lot of the firsthand witness Trek experiences that I've had to people, and had a hand in on creating some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing the people and keeping an archive of somebody doing so many end-of-year interviews that I've got, their audio, and now switching over the last few years to video, but so much of that recorded in firsthand experience and just knowing people and having people's trust. And so much of that has not been out in the general. I mean, you can only do so much with even, convention appearances and interviews and DVD extras. That only still is scratching the surface of the amount you get with some people and even the people.
Right.
And that's what Portal 47 is all about. Our where no savvy fan has gone before, when we your in-depth guide to more backstage Trek, like a mini con all year long from wherever you are, that we do over the internet and live. But even then, there's so many more angles of Trek to get out there. And so, Rod Roddenberry is running the family's legacy there, and they donated a lot of papers to the UCLA archives. Like Nick Meyer has a lot of his papers at his alma mater at the University of Iowa. Mm-hmm. My good friend John Tenuto and his wife are going in and doing a lot of research out of Nick Meyer's papers there. Not a lot is coming out other places, but last summer, Rod Roddenberry and John Champion, who
Mission Log podcast,
right, which was the flagship Roddenberry podcast, and they've since taken on a couple of other ones that were already in existence.
That's true.
But they came to me and said, Rod said, I want to do something we've got even more of my dad's papers and files and letters and memos and things that are still not in an archive yet. They soon will be, but I want to get them out in the world in a new way. And he and John, and then me in the mix later, came up with the idea for, drum roll, the Trek Files.
The Trek Files? Is that a new podcast?
That is a new podcast, yes. Thank you for asking.
Are you going to host that?
I'm going to host that.
No kidding. When does that come out?
They asked me to do this. We've been working on it, but it will debut January 23rd. So if you're hearing this later on, it's out there. Very simple. It's under the Roddenberry Podcast Network wing, Roddenberry Podcasts. You can go to podcast.roddenberry.com and subscribe, or find the way, your podcatcher of choice is in there, iTunes and all the rest. It's also like Mission Log. It's also on the Trek FM network and feed. They carry it too. We may wind up a few more places.
Wow.
But it's very simple. It's 15 minutes every week. Comes out on Tuesdays. It'll be out once a week. And myself and a guest are pulling one document out of the pile. It might be one page. It might be 20. We have a little highlight section, but we talk about it.
Okay.
We, in the context of its own time, in media, in Star Trek's development, in Gene Roddenberry's life.
Oh, wow.
And in the people, some things are from Gene, some things are to Gene.
Okay.
So it's who was involved, what was going on with this tale. And, they're from the 60s, they're from the 70s, like all the movies that were trying to happen didn't happen. And they're from the 80s. Wow. So in all the fallow time then. And, when Gene was a little on the outs, when Harv was running the movies and he was trying to find his footing, and then was given the keys back again with Next Generation, but his health was failing.
Yes.
He only was around for 2 or 3 years. So 4 years actually. So they're pieces from all of that era.
Okay.
And we start off with a piece that's not so rare, but Rod wanted us to start with the original pitch for Star Trek, because there's a section in there that is relevant to today. So hopefully everything we do is fun for history's sake, but is shedding light on people just coming to Star Trek, just coming in from the JJ movies or from even Discovery. In fact, we have another piece that is very much from the 80s going into Next Generation, but I fell off my chair because it spoke directly to a verbatim line in the pilot for Discovery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We have another piece that is going to make history, I predict, that we'll have, because I had no idea. Another document we found, I had no idea existed, and it's amazing, and it will have the Trek world abuzz for ages. I mean, we'll have headlines for it. So I'm really excited about the whole series. And I'll shut up. Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm
so excited.
I know. Me too. I have some questions.
Sure.
Are 15 minutes going to be enough per episode for these?
No. Not. I'm sorry. My Okie got in the way there. 15.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh, that's only 15
15.
minutes. Yeah.
Well, as you're finding out now, reminding, and as all my hosts over the years that have had me as a guest will remind me, they're saying I don't believe it.
Exactly.
No, we do. Here's the thing: if a document is big enough that it deserves more attention, we split it. We have multiple episodes.
Okay.
So, but sometimes we have something that's just a page. Sometimes we have some really simple things on the surface, but that they kind of unlock. We have a cute little letter that Rick Berman wrote to Gene soon after they got acquainted, before Rick was a producer, when they were developing the Next Generation. Some really simple moments, but it's like, what do they lead to, right? What's the little glimpse we get into Gene's world, into the Trek world, into the world of TV and or media in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s.
Next question. How many episodes do you have in the can already?
We've got 12 or 16. We've got a lot, yeah. We've had this. We were working on this in the summer and the fall, and originally the idea was to debut in the hiatus break for Discovery, so we wouldn't have to compete for attention, right? And then we had the holidays to dodge around a little bit. So the ducks all finally came in a row for now. We let Discovery get back out there and let everybody get that excitement out of their veins. So hopefully there's a little bit of space out there in the bandwidth.
I'm sure there is
people to take notice here. So thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. And I have one final question about the podcast. You said each episode you're going to be talking to a guest.
I was going to say yes.
Okay.
So go ahead.
First of all, is it a different guest every week? And second, can I be one of them eventually?
Well, let me see. We're doing, since it's only 15 minutes. It's a great format to have guests, and so we're doing everything in batches.
Okay.
So this first round of shows, maybe even a couple of dozen episodes, I've had 3 guests, but each one has done 4 or 5 episodes. So John has been my guest for several. In fact, he's my guest on the first 3, but then after that, there's a mix. So Dave Rossi, who started as a fanboy page at Paramount, a PA on the shows, and wound up being Mary Howard's assistant and then Rick Berman's assistant. His guy for licensing projects, and finally an associate producer on Enterprise, and was one of the producers with the Okudas on the original series remaster project when they Blu-rayed things, and had a lot of decision-making and input there, and a good friend. He's a guest, and then here's a name you may have heard, Dorothy Fontana.
I have heard DC Fontana, yes.
DC Fontana was kind enough to come over and sit with us through 4 or 5 episodes and comment on some relevant pieces.
That's amazing. I can't wait to subscribe to this.
So, yeah, and of course it's a podcast. It's a freebie. Again, podcast.roddenberry.net, and that will point you to places, but also the real-life living hub is just the Trek Files on Facebook.
So it on Facebook?
Yes, like it on Facebook, and then go there every Tuesday. And here's the deal. The document that we talk about is also there. We scan those. Each week, the new document of the week will pop up at the same time the episode does. So people can go read it, download it, follow along with us, read it ahead of time, whether it's several pages or it's 1 page. Which is going to be very cool. So, the Roddenberry's been putting out document dumps at times. They watermark things and are getting a lot of archives out there, putting scripts out, that kind of thing. So this is, in that manner, but these are just at our page. These will be the docs for that week. And then that'll be the place to comment on the episode after. So it's all centralized. It's all in one easy peasy place to go to.
Perfect. And I'm guessing there are so many documents. You could do this for 10 lifetimes.
Just about. Right.
Right.
And like I said, the pilot show, the episode 1, is not a rare piece. In fact, if you I don't care what generation you came in, if you don't eventually get around to reading our first document, I want to rip the little Star Trek name badge off your resume,
Right.
right off your shirt,
Off your uniform, yeah.
off your uniform. It's Gene's original pitch back in '64.
Oh, I'm sure I've read it. I must have.
But of course you have. And anybody that was in was an originals era fan who had Stephen Whitfield's Poe's Making of Star Trek classic book. That it's not verbatim, but he reprinted so much of the original pitch in there. Mm-hmm. But Rod wanted us to start off the show. Rod's executive producer.
Good.
And he's guiding. He's not actively giving notes back. He did on the first few episodes just to make sure we're on the same voice. We were pretty much there.
Like he does with Mission Log.
Like he does with Mission Log. Mm-hmm. Like he does with Discovery.
Yeah.
As an executive producer. But he wanted us to start with highlighting a specific segment in that pitch, which underlies what all real, as much as fans love to talk about, oh, it's not true Star Trek, that's not Star Trek. Here's what Star Trek is. As much as anything, what underlies the Star Trek notion and actually speaks to our times once again, just in a broad cultural sense. So I thought it was, it's really funny. After all these years, it's a two-sided coin. About 5-10 years ago, when I was, when the world kind of blew up, when Viacom divorced and the Berman era ended, mm-hmm. and the Decipher and the fan club that I had been working with, Communicator Magazine, all but went bankrupt, and they dropped their license. And everything I had known, the people I had worked with, everything went topsy-turvy. And on top of that, the internet and the digital revolution was happening, and we didn't work with Dead Tree Media anymore, right? And mm-hmm. business models and all of that, everything was upended. It's like, well, what now? And I was trying to find my way back. Everything was topsy-turvy. And anyway, it's since that recovery has come back, I thought at the time, maybe this is the time that I should shift gears. Maybe I should go sell shoes. Maybe I should get back into journalism, although journalism was, as it was known, was on its last legs. And I thought that everybody had heard everything. I thought it's been 20 years, it's been 30 years. People have heard all these stories. They know all this stuff. And the internet is coming along. Things are online now. Memory Alpha was starting to come along by then. Wikipedia. Nobody needed me or anybody else to tell them what had been happening. And what was amazing was I realized really quickly that after I yelled at some of the headlines I'd see on the news sites, like, this isn't news, this is 20 years old. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. We have so many new fans coming in every year, even if it's all on the internet, and it's not, mm-hmm. that you can't possibly, by the time you talk to every single person involved backstage with Star Trek who had a hand in it, it's a drop in the bucket.
Exactly.
There's just this tiny fraction of what's even available, much less if people actually go deep dive through what's on the internet, right?
Oh,
that fraction that is there. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, I get it. This is new to tons and tons of people, millions and millions of new thousands of fans every year coming along. And I went, okay. And it was very gratifying to have people say, when I first started doing podcasts and going, oh my God, I thought, I'm going to tell all my stories and I'll be out before I've ever done anything with them. And A, that hasn't happened. But B, people saying, I could just listen to you for hours, Larry, which is scary to think about. But that was very gratifying. And it dawned on me that we have all these newer, younger, not just even younger, but newer fans mm-hmm. who weren't around or didn't have the firsthand, like we were saying earlier, the firsthand experience of anybody can go. I realized this with the European fans, and now it's everybody. We have a whole, eventually, the original series fans will all be past. Yeah. Eventually, the next gen DS9 Voyager Enterprise fans will be past. Mm-hmm. The people who saw things week to week originally. And it's so cool to watch all the young fans and new fans say, shut up, you people bashing Discovery. I finally have my own Trek that I can watch every week.
Exactly.
Your one friend notwithstanding. So, it's a whole mix of those people. And I realized that there's a lot of good still to be done, the show trivia proper, but also the context of the show and the times and the people behind it, and whether they're still with us or whether they're not, and whether they've been heard from or not and deserve to be heard from. And the further back you go, I don't care if you were the second assistant janitor for craft service. If you were there and knew people and could talk about them and make them come alive for us today, from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, That's valuable. That's valuable in all these aspects. And
yeah.
So that's kind of that's what Trekland is all about for me. So doing this podcast is a way to bring a little bit of that in little capsulefuls, little nuggets for people, and show a little bit about what Gene and the people he work with, reveal a little bit more of that too.
I think it's a wonderful endeavor. I'm excited. I can't wait. I'm going to download it I wish it was more than once a week.
Now, Sean, there's plenty going on out there. I hear they're even doing a new Star Trek show now. So,
Oh, I heard something about that.
But no, and it gets back to the point of, I said I didn't want to do a show on my own. I still have my other main idea I want to do, and hopefully we'll start working on that now. But when Rod came to me with this idea and John worked on a format, I was like, I'm there. We can do several at a time. We can have guests. We can get out I hate to say new content because it always sounds like dog food to me. Like, here's another can of content.
Right.
But we can open up so many new facets and insights for people that I've never seen before, much less other people.
Oh yeah.
And add that to the tapestry of what's there and just add that in. So my own little personal goal of not having just more same old, hearing one more person talk about one more old thing. We are, but hopefully it's all kinds of new old things. So new angles, new insights,
It'll be new for somebody.
Yes. I need to keep telling myself, all of this is new for somebody, which is wonderful.
And you know what the thing is? Even if I've watched an episode of Star Trek 10 times, I'll watch it 12 more times. I may have heard the story once. I'll hear it 10 more times. I love hearing it. And I think I'm like most Star Trek fans. And everybody just wants to soak it up and get as much as they can, even if they've heard it before.
And you just remind me of something else. You know what? The coolest thing is watching an episode for the 10th or 12th time and still finding something new.
Because you do. I have.
Yeah. Even if it's just your eye notices its original series and, oh my God, there's a piece of duct tape sitting where the bridge red rail, somebody forgot to take it off when they filmed, right?
Yeah.
I saw a clip just today, or somebody somewhere on some site had a frame grab. It wasn't something special. It was just Riker, but it was a rear angle on the D bridge where they're up against the aft stations looking forward, and up on the ceiling piece there's like a black square. And somebody said, I wonder what that is. And my first thought was, that's hidden. That's an angle you never see. It's very high. That was probably some kind of a mounting bracket for light, because they were always notoriously having to deal with lighting on that bridge. And then Voyager and DS9, they started building in the set design included, lighting things. And I saw somebody down below had taken the time to write to Marvin or Dan Curry or somebody who was online before I had a chance to, and they said, it's a mounting bracket for a light instrument. But but that's exactly what I mean. There'll always be questions and the race for answers and understanding. And, the years go by and we don't have a lot of the creators with us forever.
Well, that's right.
So and it's so easy. Any fan of anything, the shiny, bright faces out front are who you glom onto, because that's obvious. That's what sells the show. That's what makes it come alive. And we love the actors. But when you get to a certain point in your fandom, you realize there's so much more beyond what you're going to glean from the actors in an interview, seeing them on stage, live, and you love them, and they're the charismatic machines, Oh,
yeah.
But the overall depth of Star Trek is going to come from the writers, producers, just the first step, and then all the creative designers below that. And then when you're really at that level and you just enjoy, then you're watching the extras in the background that don't get any credit and you don't hear them talk, and you get to that level, the stunt people and all of that. And that's what I love doing, and that's what, Trekland, and that's especially what, Portal 47 is about. And the Trek Files is another little way another angle we can bring that out. And again, it's something that I don't think is out there anywhere. So I really appreciate Rod and John coming to me and asking me to do this. So.
It's terrific. It's a deep dive behind the scenes. I can't wait to devour all the episodes. Just to reiterate, all the stuff that you're doing, where can people find all that stuff?
All the stuff. The best place, I guess, is still LarryNemecek.com, my website.
Okay.
And, you can get to Portal 47 there. You can get to my store. You can get to the Con of Wrath that we're trying to wrap up now in our post time. And at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, which is the same as my YouTube channel. And at Larry Nemecek's Trekland is my Instagram. Yay. I have. Oh, and I also have a little thing. I don't know. It's not widely been out there, but every week on Facebook, again, I have what I call Facebook Trekland Tuesdays Live on Facebook. So if you go to my Larry Nemecek's Trekland Hub page on Facebook, I do a 15-minute or so live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific.
Okay.
So 4 Eastern, and it's there for the Europeans to get it at what, 9 and
10.
Yeah,
I think.
9 and 10. Yes. So 9 in the UK and 10 in the continent. And anyway, it's just 10-15 minutes. It's live. People can yell back at me. I have an offbeat topic, and my B story every week is following along the Parrot Analytics, which is a metric for measuring the online expressions of Discovery in all the streaming shows that don't have actual Nielsen, hard viewer data. But it's one apples to apples way to compare week to week and show to show what's going on with Discovery, and that's a lot of fun. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about that, so I had somebody put me on to watching. But anyway, that's on Tuesdays, Facebook, 1 o'clock Pacific, Trekland Tuesdays Live. You just go to my page, and then they're archived, so you can watch the old ones. But they tend to be topical.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of reacting to what's gone on in the Trekverse. But again, I'll kind of just brush aside and talk very briefly. If everybody's consumed with dropping the F-bomb that week, or they're all consumed with, what the Andorians and Tellarite looks like, whether good, bad, or indifferent, I'll kind of talk about that. But I always try to step back and take a bigger picture look at some aspect, and then maybe talk about something I'm doing too, or where they overlap. But anyway, I invite everybody to come in and join, and if you're there live, pop in and make a comment, and I'll try to say something if I see it going by.
Perfect. I love that idea. You're going to be the king of the 15 minutes.
Well, sometimes the Facebook Live stretches to maybe 18 or 19. But,
well, sure.
Yeah, but on the Trek Files, John keeps me honest.
Okay.
John's basically kind of quasi-directing the shows while we're there. So, no, we stay pretty honest with Trek Files.
Okay, sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Good, thanks.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and I can't wait to have you on for a fourth time in the future. Once you have another project, or you're wrapping something up, or you have something else to promote, we'll have you on again.
Well, thank you, Sean. Thanks a lot. And we're all just watching Discovery. I know what's funny is all the writer-producers, they're working right now as we speak on the second season. That's one thing about this streaming format. The time lag is so off. With the old shows, like 26 a year, I wouldn't even try to talk to anybody until they were basically done with the year, and they would know that even though there were a few left to air, we were basically done. And even though I was I was pretty trusted insider all those years I was working on the companion book and afterwards. But the time lag now is so off that even though a lot of them appreciate me, I don't think they're comfortable. And CBS, the whole nature of this with the serialized streaming focus and the fate of a whole new corporate entity riding on Discovery, they are so hyper, tight-fisted. Plus, they have the After Trek show, and and it's all these aspects that we've kind of slid into them, whether we were Trek fans or not, with social media and what are the after shows for Game of Thrones and the Talking Dead and
all those ones,
now it's a thing, right? The after show is a thing, and I'm glad to see Trek representing there, and they're holding into that. But it's social media, so it's a new landscape. But even given all that, it's wacky to know that waiting for the shows to air to talk to them, that their memories are already fuzzing out, especially on this front end when it went on for like a year and a half instead of a shorter period, right?
True.
Right, the R&D for Discovery, I mean, and from Brian to the transition to.
Well, it took a long time to get out.
Right, and we'll have, the statute of limitations will have on people's comfort zones or contractual obligations that'll eventually dissipate, and we'll have more of that come out as it goes along. But not for the gossip factor, but just we just are curious how and why things are that way. At least I am. And that's the way I've always been.
The nuts and bolts.
Yeah. When I had the keys to the Communicator magazine, that's what I did. When I have a book, that's what I did. And we live in a time now, like I said, everything blew up, and it was like, go west, young man, and start your own platform and brand and media. So since the late aughts, and that's what I've tried to do. And so thank you for helping me do a little more of that. Let the word out a little more.
My pleasure. I'm always happy to help.
Transfer of data is complete.
And that was Larry Nemecek. Great interview. Great talking with him. Could have talked to him for a few more hours.
Okay.
So, just to reiterate, the Trek Files debuts January 23rd. A 15-minute podcast. Once a week. It's going to be awesome.
15-minute once a week?
Yeah.
Not bad.
Not a lot of time investment, and they're going to be going through all the different memos in the archives. So that's great.
Yeah. I always like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like a deep dive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to be awesome. So once again, Larry, thanks for being on the podcast. Looking forward to future talks.
If you are loving this podcast, you should tell a friend about it.
Spread the word about podcasts you think they would enjoy. There's something for everyone, from entertainment and lifestyle
To news and politics
and more. Share it on social media.
Believe it or not, some people don't know how great podcasts are.
or even how to find and listen to them.
You can help change that with a click. Tell your friends about your favorite podcast.
Thanks for spreading the word.
Okay, so to wrap up our show, a couple emails and stuff, and guess who sent us feedback for previous episodes?
Who's that?
Our good buddy Richard from Australia.
Oh, cool. Hey, Richard.
So I got a comment here from our episode 183, the Black Widow versus the Red Sparrow episode. Okay, so he says, so much podcasts, so many comments, where to begin? Oh, Josh hates Looper. Yep, definitely. I'm with Katie on that one. I may have a growing, yet somehow still appropriate podcast crush on Katie as being awesome, mostly because she seemed happy to be McCoy. Speaking of, I was contemplating trying to cast the Rusted Robot regulars in other genre roles after the shout-out in this episode to my post. But as I was pondering that, I realized Josh totally is comic book guy, with added irony that his lovely wife is a real comic book gal, shop owner and all that. In between all those A1, A2, and A3 discussions, all I could hear was comic book guy mansplaining to non-nerds how everything was proved in Season 4, Episode 3, and then how it was totally undone in Season 8, Episode 11, so that show is dead to him. I am not sure what that makes Sean in the Simpsons universe, though I could see Smithers doing a Soulforge podcast. Yeah, he has duck and cover in brackets after that. Anywho, Shane is probably Chekhov in the Trek universe, at least TOS Chekhov. Young and impressionable, unversed in the ways of the Trek world, and possibly highly excitable. Oh, to help Shane dig himself out of the hole in his supermodel garden, all he needs to do is tell Sarah that, of course, she is the brightest and prettiest flower in that garden, and all of the rest are mere weeds in comparison. Please note, I am single for a reason. To me, the girl next door stereotype is not literally the girl next door, but the, if you will, plain Jane that isn't the supermodel when you first meet them, but the ever-true, loving, supportive, lovely person who is a supermodel on the inside, and you grow to discover that, hey, in addition to all that goodness inside, they're actually pretty cute on the outside also. That whole conversation made Sean into the Peter Capaldi doctor of the group, telling everyone they need to be all PC and all. By the way, I always considered MJ was the ideal of the girl next door type, also literally living next door. Yes, Peter Parker does always say when she moved in and he first saw her, he fell for her, but I always considered MJ more the girl next door rather than the supermodel. Gwen Stacy was or is the hot one, but also had the brains to appeal to Peter Parker's science side. Of course, I am not a longtime Spidey Comics guy, so I am sure a real comic book guy would care to correct me on that. Another fun podcast, folks. Greatly enjoyed. And then P.S. Worst podcast comment ever.
Okay. Well, I kind of hurt by the comic book guy comment.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because it's a negative stereotype.
It is, but he's a know-it-all kind of guy, and you have that persona.
No, I just know it all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You got the persona. You don't look like him or anything, but...
Well, I kind of feel hurt by that, Richard.
Oh.
Kind of hurt a bit.
A little bit painful.
Yeah, but okay, all right.
Okay, and then he had another comment. Oh, by the way, some thoughts on Discovery as of episode 11 with minimal spoilers. If you listen to The Rusted Robot, then you know this already. I am loving the Mirror Universe stuff, but here's my problem. I love it because of the callbacks to classic Trek, not because I love Lorca, ugh, or Michael, or Tilly, though she's kind of cute, and I find it hard to feel for any of the characters, though the Doctor I kind of felt bad for. Having said I love this part of the show, I hated Mudd. That's not my Harry Mudd from TOS. Far more sinister, and yes, the Harry Mudd from iMudd was somewhat sinister in his goals to aid the androids to take over the universe. Oh, spoiler alert from 1967. But he was still bumbling and more comedy than the convict, Stella 500. I am so old school Trek, I think this biases me against Discovery. Now, true, took a while to warm up to Enterprise, but the last season totally I very much enjoyed, and also Enterprise fit more logically into the Trek universe and made far more sense. So many things in Discovery just seem off. From the uniforms, yeah, I don't buy all the explanations I've so far heard, to the mixing up of comm and bridge sounds from later series that just don't work for me. Now I hope the Defiant reference brings us a link to the TOS universe, tech, look, etc., that we're used to, but who knows. I do realize this whole thing is so complex given the 50 years between TOS and what they could portray to now, and if you go too retro in a look, it loses interest for modern audiences, but is the leap from view screens to 3D holograms for communications too much? Where are the bulky pads or the square floppy disk storage units? I know Discovery is a prototype science vessel, but it still doesn't fit within the established canon because even if they use a mushroom drive and all that stuff, talking with other normal vessels or Starfleet or whoever would have to be compatible with the old style. Yet, nope, so it just feels wrong. BSG was a reboot of sorts, yet this is supposed to fit within the original TOS universe, and for me it doesn't. So I'm finding this a bit difficult to deal with. Oops, this probably deserves its own discussion thread for a flame war to break out. So that's what he says so far. And then he ends it off by saying, I am not joshing Discovery, I am watching it. I am enjoying it for what it is, but it very much is new BSG versus old BSG. If this show was called Star Walkers or something and the Klingons were called Winghings, I'd be thinking this was a pretty fun, interesting show. But it's Trek, so there are always going to be comparisons from us old school comic book guy types to one degree or another. My jury is still out.
Okay, well, he's right. As its own show, it has promise.
Oh, it's fantastic.
But it's not.
It's got issues, and
it's
like
trying to fit into an existing world,
right,
where it clearly does not belong. He is completely right that if it was its own series in its own universe, I would be watching it.
Right, but because it's Star Trek, it's not fitting in with what you. And Larry and I actually talked about that in the interview, which you'll hear later, because you haven't heard our conversation yet. But we talk about that. We're in the midst of it, so we can't actually see the forest for the trees. We don't know what's going on. We have to wait for them to do the whole thing first. So maybe they will, maybe they won't. We don't know. But the one thing I want to bring up, the last episode that came out, they were still in the Mirror Universe, and Ash Tyler, spoiler alert, he met Mirror Universe Vok. So it's been confirmed that Ash Tyler is Vok. Okay, so we knew all along that he was the Klingon and whatever. Maybe you didn't know that. Maybe you hadn't gotten that far. But you don't care anyway, so it doesn't matter. So, but I like what they've done because Vok was the torchbearer, right? Okay, and in the Mirror Universe, Vok is called the Firewolf. So fire, torchbearer, and after they've been reduced, the flames have all been burned out. It's ashes. So Ash Tyler, they gave it away right in the beginning. The Firewolf, the torchbearer. Burn that all down, you've got Ash.
Okay.
So, just wanted to bring that up. I don't know if anybody's ever said it before. I haven't seen it in any of the things I've read. So maybe that makes me super extra smart and insightful. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't care. But that's what I've got. So anyway, we won't talk about more Discovery because you haven't watched it. But I do have an email.
Get what we got, Mr. Roboto. It's another email.
Oh, sweet. Who's this one from?
Well, you remember a few weeks ago, our 4th year anniversary episode?
Yes.
Episode 181?
Yes.
Okay. So, my girlfriend Cheryl's brother listens to the podcast.
Yes.
And we didn't know if we should call him Matt, Matthew, or Matty. So he actually listened to the episode this week and sent us an email called Name Preference. Hello, Darth Vaderloo and the Rusted Robot Gang. Although my family calls me Matthew, or Stinky depending on who you ask, most people call me Matt. I find Matthew is too formal for my personality, as Sean might have figured out. I am far from sophisticated. However, I do like the idea of being called the Dark Lord Stormkiller as suggested. If I ever become an evil villain, I'm totally stealing that. Keep up the great work, Matt.
Well, it's good to hear from you, Dark Lord.
Yeah. That works for me. Yep. Cheryl's family is very formal. They don't do any short forms of their name.
Oh, really?
But he's way more relaxed, so Matthew becomes Matt. But they all call him Matthew. It's true. Like, Cheryl's mom is named Suzanne. Don't ever call her Sue. Holy crap, big trouble. So that kind of thing. Yeah, no informal names, no nicknames, nothing like that.
All right. Well, the Dark Lord Stormkiller has sent in what he prefers.
That's
so
right.
We'll stick with that.
Exactly. So that's pretty much all we've got for this week's podcast.
Well, one more thing.
Oh, you have more stuff?
I've checked out Black Lightning.
Oh, how was it?
It was good.
Okay.
Now, it's got a slight different tone than the rest of the WB superheroes.
Okay.
It is older.
What do you mean? Like it's more mature content?
It's more mature, but it's also...
Does it take place in the same timeline?
We don't know yet. Probably.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the WB shows, and you got to
integrate
join that
everything
all together so you can have the crossovers and you can build off each other.
And then you have the true Super Black Legends Flareoverse
Exactly.
thing?
So, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of reminiscent of Season 1 of Arrow.
Oh, okay.
Where it was darker and more killy.
Yeah.
A lot of people died in this one.
Ah, okay. I can't wait to check it out.
It's touching heavy on the race. Like they're not turning away from it.
Right.
They're full on deep dive.
Good. Is it good or is it preachy?
It's not. Well, the one daughter is preachy.
Okay.
But that's her character. She's preachy.
Okay, gotcha.
I think as it is, it's not. You don't feel like you're being slapped in the face with social justice.
Okay. It's just part of the background.
Yeah, it's part of the story rather than, oh, look at me. Because I can't stand, oh, look at me.
Yeah.
Shows.
No, that's not good.
Because then...
Bonk, bonk on the head.
Exactly. This one didn't feel that way. Now, I've only seen the one episode.
Well, of course.
So, I can't even give it the test. But so far, I'm enjoying it. Villain, we don't get to see much of the main villain.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got a predilection for fish.
What do you mean?
Well, he kills the one guy by throwing him in, like he's a no name. We don't even know the actor's name. Like he throws him in a fish tank full of piranhas.
Oh, okay.
And they start tearing him apart. And he shoots another guy with a spear gun.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
I don't know if it has anything or if it'll even last, but in this episode he's got a predilection for fish.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if it's themed or it's just whatever.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah. So far, so keep watching.
Okay. Well, that's exciting then. I can't wait. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I want to start watching a new anime.
Oh, what's that?
It's a couple years old at this point. It's Gate.
Gate. Haven't heard of it.
Trans-dimensional portal opens up in downtown Tokyo. People from the other side, which is a fantasy world, raid Japan. So Japan fights them back and goes through the other side and sets up a base, and they're trying to figure out what's happening on the other side. Kind of what you would expect if fantasy creatures and fantasy armies try to invade a modern country with, guns. They kind of just tear the whole thing apart. It is in the isekai thing that we talked about before, the other world.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Normally in those shows, it's the hero that is like, oh, he can never do anything wrong. He goes to the other world and he's super powerful. It's that, but Japan is the character. Because the Japanese Self-Defense Force is unstoppable. They cannot be beaten. They got perfect timing for everything. So yeah, and in the one scene, there's the Russians, Chinese, and American special forces are trying to break into this hot springs inn where they are, and the Japanese Self-Defense Forces are fighting them off perfectly quietly in this forest. People are dying all over the place, and you don't hear a thing.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's called Gate.
Gate. And there's 2 seasons of it so far.
Okay.
It's pretty good.
It actually sounds like something I might be interested in.
Yeah.
I'll probably have to come over here and watch it with you, because I wouldn't seek it out on my own.
No, it's really good. I would actually recommend you watch it.
Okay. I'll see what I can do. So, that's been episode 184 of the Rusted Robot Podcast. Thanks for being a part of it, Josh.
No, this was an easy one.
It was. We don't have much to record because it was all done the other night with Larry.
Yep.
I wish you could have been there for that, but, work and stuff. That's right. So, just a reminder, check out the Trek Files on iTunes or any podcatcher of your choice. You can find us on YouTube to listen to all of our episodes there. Just look up my name, Sean Vanderloo. And all the other ways to reach us are in the end credits, which you can stay tuned for. So thanks again for sharing the links and coming by. And remember, the knack of flying is learning how to throw yourself at the ground and miss. This has been another episode of the Rusted Robot Podcast. You can contact us by emailing therustedrobot@gmail.com or tweeting us at therustedrobot. Visit our website at therustedrobot.podbean.com. And, if you would, please check us out and like us on Facebook. A 5-star review in iTunes is appreciated. The Rusted Robot Podcast was written, produced, scored, edited, engineered, and directed by Sean Vanderloo. Your co-host was Josh Montney. Don't forget to visit Jump City Comics in the 101 Mall and listen to our other show, the Soulforge Podcast. Visit Sean on Twitter and Instagram at Darth Vaderloo.
The Rusted Robot Podcast. Think about it. Hi, this is Admiral Adama.
My name's Robert J. Sawyer. This is Cena Grace.
Hey, this is Stephen Amell.
Hey, this is Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek.
I'm hanging with Sean
and Josh.
They're telling all about general geekery.
And you are listening to the Rusted
Robot
Podcast.
The number one rated robot-related podcast
in Northern Ontario.
You should be following them on Twitter.
Keep listening.
Don't forget to follow them on Twitter. Subscribe on iTunes.
TheRustedRobot.podbean.com.
The Rusted Robot Podcast. Think about it.
Rusted Robot.
This has been a Valley of Vanderloo podcast production, all rights reserved.
This transmission ends now.